Hi there. This is Jude Egan with Egan Law in Santa Maria, California. We serve clients from Santa Barbara to Paso Robles and over to Kern County. Um, Look, there's no way that I can or anyone can tell you this is exactly how your divorce is going to turn out. But what we can do is say, here's what's most likely under the circumstances. So I know pretty quickly when I'm meeting with a new client, probably I would say within the first 30 minutes or so, I know pretty quickly what's going to happen, what the outcome is going to look like. But I don't know with certainty. And what I mean by that is I can say what happens if you win every issue and what happens if you lose every issue and get a range between your best case scenario and your worst case scenario. And then I know that this is the range, what I call the range of reasonable outcomes. And I know you're not going to lose every issue, and I know you're not going to win every issue because in family law it's 50%, and you probably are going to win about half the issues that you bring up, and you're probably going to lose about half the issues that you bring up. So a reasonable settlement is right there in the middle of the range between your best case outcome and your worst case outcome. And I think what happens is people say things like, I'm going to take you to the cleaners, or, I'm going to take you for everything you're worth, that kind of stuff. And it's just not going to happen unless you absolutely agree to it, because the reality is you're going to get half the stuff and your spouse is going to get half the stuff. So the way you win your divorce is you get the half of the stuff that you want. And if you figure that the goal under the California Family Code, the goal is, or the obligation of the court is to divide the estate equally, which means half and half, then when you're trying to get a settlement, you're looking at dividing the estate equally as the baseline. And you say, okay, what happens if we divide the estate equally? One way to do that is to literally sell everything you own, reduce it all to one big, huge pile of cash or small pile of cash, depending on what you got. And then say, here's $1 for you and here's $1 for you until you've divvied up all the dollars and then you go your separate ways. But we don't normally do that. And the reason for that is you already have cars and you may have a house that you own that somebody wants, and you may have a 401k that somebody wants. And so then what we're trying to do is get values for things and then do as close to an approximation of 50-50 as we can. But within that, you should think about the things that you want most. So if what you want most is the house, and you know that what your spouse wants most is their pension, and there's a difference in value between the two of them, one thing to do is figure out how much of a difference in value is there, and what else could you get. So for example, we just resolved a case where the person wanted to keep their pension and the other person wanted the house, and they had this 2% interest rate as a holdover from the COVID era loans on the house. And so the person that got to keep their pension gave the other person 3 years to keep their name on the loan at the lower interest rate so they could afford to keep the house. Now, it was an unequal division. It was not 50-50, but this gave the person who wanted to keep the house more time, and that's what they really wanted. They really wanted to stay in the house. And so if you start with, like we call this bargaining in the shadow of the law, if you start with the concept that it's going to be 50-50, we're going to divide everything you have, everything of value, your pension, your 401k, your unvested stock options, your interest in a business, your the equity in your F-150, all of that we're going to divide directly in half. You start with that as the proposition. And then we say, let's make two columns. We make two columns, one says husband, one says wife, and you start putting into each column the value of the things they want the most. So I always start there and say, okay, let's fill these columns up by awarding things to either spouse that they want most. And then when we total everything up at the bottom, we say how much would one spouse have to give the other spouse to equalize, to make it to 50%. And then if that number is too big, and nobody has the money to do that, which happens sometimes, then we figure out what can we trade? What can we add to spouse A's column or to spouse B's column? Is there debt they can take on? In this case, can the person use the other person's credit for a few years so they can keep a low payment on the house? Can we reduce the alimony payment or increase the alimony payment? Is there stuff we can do to equalize without equalizing? And that's what you should be doing as you think about how your divorce is going to turn out. What happens is people spend far too much time thinking about how they're going to screw their spouse or how they're going to get screwed by their spouse. And they start wondering, what can I do to get more? And the answer is almost always nothing. You can't do anything to get more. The most you're going to get is 50% plus or minus a couple of percentages off of that. But that's where you're going to end up. And if we know that, then we shouldn't be spending tens of thousands of dollars in attorney's fees trying to get more. It's a sucker bet. And your attorney may tell you, oh yeah, we're going to do better than that. Or I'm going to get you everything you want. Or you're going to keep your pension and the house, and you're not going to pay alimony. And this is how we're going to do it. It almost never happens. And part of the reason for that is that judges are people too. They believe in fairness. They don't believe anybody's really done anything wrong. They don't care about affairs. They don't care about your credit card spending habit. They don't care about porn addiction. They don't care about gambling addiction. What they want to do is divide everything in half and get a reasonable custody and visitation schedule with your kids and get a reasonable support order. If you know that, then you don't spend tens of thousands of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars, as some of my clients do, fighting over things that you're never going to get. And so keep your eyes focused on the prize. The prize is getting the assets that you want most and then equalizing from there. If you enjoyed this video, give me a follow. Give us a call if you need to talk things over. We do rights consultations all the time with people. Happy to help with any of that. Give us a call.